The phone rang at 2:47 a.m., the kind of call that never brings good news. Marcus stared at the unknown number glowing in the darkness of his penthouse bedroom, his hand hovering over the screen. 2 years. 2 years since he'd heard that voice, since she'd walked out of his life without explanation, without closure, without a trace. But somehow he knew. Before he even answered, he knew it was her. Marcus. Her voice cracked across the line, and every carefully constructed wall he'd built came crashing down. I know I have no right to call you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But you need to come to Boston. There's someone you need to meet. His throat closed. His heart hammered against his ribs. Camila. The name tasted like hope and heartbreak all at once. Please, she whispered, and he heard something in her voice he'd never heard before. Fear. It's about your son. 3 years earlier, Marcus had been a different man. Not the Forbes 30 under 30 tech entrepreneur the world knew now, but a graduate student drowning in student loans and surviving on ramen noodles and ambition. He'd met Camila at a coffee shop near MIT, where she worked the early morning shift while pursuing her own degree in social work. She'd gotten his order wrong 3 times before he'd asked her out, and she'd said yes with a smile that made him forget he was supposed to be studying for his thesis defense. Their relationship had been electric from the start, the kind of connection that made him believe in soulmates and destiny, and all the things he'd dismissed as romantic nonsense before her. She'd understood his drive, his obsession with building something that mattered, his need to prove to everyone who doubted him that he could succeed. She'd stayed up with him through countless all-nighters, debugging code and believing in his vision even when investors laughed him out of conference rooms. They'd talked about the future with the casual certainty of people who couldn't imagine being apart. Marriage, children, growing old together while changing the world one innovation at a time. Marcus had been designing an engagement ring in secret, saving every spare dollar, planning a proposal he hoped would be worthy of her. Then on a Tuesday morning in October, she disappeared. He'd woken up to find her side of the bed cold, her clothes gone from the closet, her toothbrush missing from the bathroom. No note. No explanation. Just absence where she used to be. He called her phone 100 times, sent 1,000 texts, contacted her friends, her family, everyone who might know where she'd gone. Her mother had answered the door with red eyes and told him Camila needed space, that she'd asked not to be contacted, that she was sorry but couldn't give him more information than that. He'd filed a missing persons report, but the police had found her within days, confirmed she was safe and had left of her own free will. They told him there was nothing they could do. People had the right to disappear if they wanted to. For months, he'd been consumed by the mystery of it. What had he done wrong? What had he missed? Had she met someone else? Had his ambition driven her away? Had she simply stopped loving him? The questions had eaten at him, hollowed him out until grief turned to anger, and anger eventually calcified into the cold determination that fueled his success. He'd thrown himself into his work with single-minded intensity, and within a year, his tech startup had caught the attention of major investors. Within 2 years, he'd sold it for a figure that made headlines and launched 3 more companies that revolutionized their industries. He'd become exactly what he'd always wanted to be: successful, respected, financially secure enough that he'd never feel powerless again. But none of it filled the Camila-shaped hole in his chest. None of it answered the question that haunted his quiet moments. Why? Now, standing outside a modest apartment building in Boston's Dorchester neighborhood, Marcus felt like that powerless graduate student again. The address Camila had given him belonged to a 3-story walk-up that had seen better decades, with peeling paint and a front door that didn't quite close properly. This wasn't the life he'd imagined for her. This wasn't the future they planned together. He climbed the stairs slowly, counting each step to keep his racing thoughts under control. Apartment 3B. He knocked, and the door opened immediately, like she'd been waiting on the other side. Camila looked different. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and worry that had become a constant companion. But she was still beautiful, still her, and seeing her face after 2 years of absence hit him like a physical blow. Marcus. She stepped back, letting him enter. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. You said I have a son. His voice came out harder than he intended, sharp with the hurt he'd thought he'd buried. That tends to get someone's attention. The apartment was small but clean, filled with the kind of second-hand furniture people accumulated when money was tight. Children's toys were scattered across the living room floor, bright primary colors against worn carpet. And then he saw him. A little boy, maybe 18 months old, playing with wooden blocks in a portable playpen. Dark curly hair, deep brown eyes, the exact same dimple in his left cheek that Marcus saw in the mirror every morning. The resemblance was undeniable, unmistakable, devastating. His name is Julian, Camila said softly. He'll be 2 in 3 months. Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the magnitude of what he was seeing. He had a son, a child who'd existed for almost 2 years without him. A little boy who looked at him now with curious, innocent eyes that held no recognition, no understanding that the stranger in the doorway was his father. Why? The word came out broken. Why didn't you tell me? Camila wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture he remembered from when she was trying to hold herself together. Because I was terrified. Because the night before I left, I overheard you on the phone with your investor, the one who was threatening to pull funding. You told him you couldn't afford distractions, that you were completely focused on the company, that nothing would get in the way of your success. Her voice cracked. I'd just taken a pregnancy test that morning. I was going to tell you that night. But when I heard you say those words, I realized I couldn't be the thing that destroyed your dreams. I couldn't let our child be the distraction that cost you everything you'd worked for. So you just left? You made that decision for both of us. Marcus felt anger rising, hot and righteous. You didn't think I deserved to know? To choose? I was 24 years old, pregnant and terrified. Her eyes flashed with her own anger now, with the fire he'd always loved about her. You were on the verge of either incredible success or complete failure. Your entire future hung in the balance. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From being a father. From having a family. From having to choose between us and your dreams. From resenting me and the baby if the company failed because you were splitting your focus. She stopped, took a shaking breath. My father left my mother when I was 3 because he said we held him back, that he could have been someone important if he hadn't been trapped by family obligations. I grew up watching my mother work 3 jobs and still hearing her cry at night because she blamed herself for ruining his life. I couldn't do that to you. I couldn't risk you looking at Julian the way my father looked at me, like we were the reason his dreams died. The apartment fell silent except for Julian's babbling as he stacked blocks. Marcus stared at Camila, seeing her properly for the first time since arriving. Not just the woman who'd left him, but the scared girl who'd made an impossible choice based on her own trauma, her own fears. Didn't make it right. It didn't erase 2 years of his son's life that he'd missed, but it made it human. Understandable, even if unforgivable. You should have told me, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. You should have trusted me to make my own choice. But I'm here now. So tell me what changed. Why did you call me after all this time? Camila's eyes filled with tears. Because Julian is sick. Because I've been doing this alone and I can't anymore. Because our son needs his father, and I need help, and pride doesn't matter when your child is in danger. The words hit Marcus like bullets. Sick? What do you mean sick? He has a rare blood disorder. The doctors have been monitoring it for 6 months, trying different treatments. But last week they told me he needs a bone marrow transplant. I'm not a match. None of my family is a match. But you might be. Or someone in your family might be. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know what I did was wrong. But please, Marcus. Please get tested. Please help me save our son. What happened next changed everything. Marcus didn't think, didn't hesitate, didn't let the hurt and anger stop him from doing what needed to be done. He got tested that afternoon at Boston Children's Hospital. Expedited results through every connection and dollar he had. His entire family got tested, his parents flying in from Chicago within hours of his call, his sister canceling a business trip in London to be there. The doctors worked quickly, efficiently, and 3 days later Marcus got the call. He was a match. Not just a possible match, but a near-perfect match, the kind of compatibility they'd been praying for. The transplant was scheduled for 2 weeks later, giving Marcus time to undergo the necessary medical preparations while Julian went through pre-transplant conditioning. Those 2 weeks became the strangest, most intense period of Marcus's life. He moved into a hotel near Camila's apartment, spent every possible moment with Julian, learning his son in concentrated doses that felt both precious and heartbreaking. Julian loved dinosaurs and hated bananas. He could count to 10 in English and Spanish, courtesy of Camila's bilingual household. He laughed when Marcus made silly faces and cried when thunderstorms rolled through Boston's autumn skies. He called Camila Mama and called Marcus man, unable to wrap his toddler mouth around more complex words yet. Marcus fell completely, irrevocably in love. Every moment with Julian felt like a gift and a theft simultaneously. A gift because he was here now, getting to know his son, building a relationship from scratch. A theft because he should have been there from the beginning, should have witnessed first steps and first words and all the milestones Camila had experienced alone. They didn't talk about the past much during those weeks. They focused on Julian, on keeping him comfortable and distracted while his small body prepared for the medical ordeal ahead. But in the quiet moments, after Julian fell asleep and Camila made tea that neither of them really drank, the conversations happened. "I followed your success," Camila admitted one night. They were sitting on her worn couch, exhausted from a day of hospital visits and medical consultations. "I read every article, watched every interview. I saw you become everything you dreamed about, and I told myself I'd made the right choice. That you were better off without us. I would have traded all of it," Marcus said quietly. "Every company, every dollar, every achievement. I would have given it all up to have you both in my life. I know that now. I knew it then too, if I'm honest with myself. But fear makes you do irrational things. Makes you believe lies because they're easier than facing the truth." She looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw the weight of 2 years of single motherhood in her eyes. "I was so scared, Marcus. Scared of being like my mother, scared of trapping you. Scared of failing Julian if I couldn't provide for him alone. I thought being strong meant not needing anyone. I thought asking for help was admitting defeat. Strength isn't doing everything alone," Marcus said. "It's knowing when to let people in. When to trust that the people who love you won't abandon you when things get hard. Like I abandoned you. You didn't abandon me. You made a choice based on fear and trauma, and it was the wrong choice, but it came from trying to protect the people you loved. That's not abandonment. That's misguided heroism." He took her hand, felt her fingers tremble in his. "But we can't change the past. We can only decide what we do now. And right now our son needs both of us. So we figure out how to be parents together, even if we're not together. We put him first, and we deal with everything else later." Camila squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For the time you lost, for the pain I caused, for all of it. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I know. Forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to anger won't help Julian. And because some part of me understands why you did it, even if I wish you'd chosen differently." He wiped her tears with his thumb, the gesture achingly familiar. "Now let's focus on getting our son through this. Everything else can wait." The transplant was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. Marcus checked into Boston Children's Hospital the night before, underwent the final preparations that would allow doctors to harvest his bone marrow. The procedure itself was straightforward for him, uncomfortable but not dangerous, done under anesthesia while his stem cells were collected and prepared for Julian. When he woke up in recovery, groggy and sore, the first thing he asked about was Julian. "The transplant went perfectly," the nurse told him with a warm smile. "Your son is in pediatric ICU now, and his mother is with him. He's doing great, Mr. Chen. You may have just saved his life." Marcus had built 3 multi-million-dollar companies from nothing. He'd been featured in major publications, spoken at conferences, advised Fortune 500 CEOs on innovation and strategy. But nothing, absolutely nothing in his life had ever mattered more than those words. You may have just saved his life. He was wheeled to Julian's room as soon as he was stable enough, over the protests of doctors who thought he should rest longer. But Marcus didn't care about protocol or proper recovery procedures. He needed to see his son. Julian looked so small in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and 4 lines, his little body fighting an invisible war that would determine his future. Camila sat beside him, holding his tiny hand, whispering things Marcus couldn't hear. She looked up when he entered, and the gratitude in her eyes was almost painful to witness. "They said it went perfectly," she whispered. "They said he's already accepting the new cells. The doctor called it a best-case scenario." Marcus positioned his wheelchair next to the bed, took Julian's other hand. His son's eyes were closed, his breathing even, sedated through the most critical hours while his body adjusted to the new bone marrow that would rebuild his immune system from the ground up. "Hey buddy," Marcus said softly. "Dad's here. I'm right here and I'm not going anywhere. You're doing so great, Julian. So brave. Just keep fighting, okay? Keep being the strong, amazing kid I know you are." They stayed like that for hours, both parents flanking their son, holding vigil through the night. Nurses came and went, checking vitals and adjusting medications. Doctors consulted charts and murmured in medical terminology that sounded like foreign languages. But Marcus and Camila stayed constant, present, together in a way they hadn't been since the day she'd left. "I don't know how to do this," Camila said eventually, her voice barely above a whisper. "How to be co-parents when we have so much history, so much hurt. How to put that aside for him." "We learn," Marcus said simply. "We make mistakes and we figure it out. We communicate honestly instead of making assumptions. We trust each other even when it's hard. And we remember that loving Julian doesn't require us to have our own relationship figured out. We just need to show up for him consistently, reliably. The rest will work itself out." "Will it?" She looked at him across Julian's sleeping form. "Can you really forgive me for what I took from you? For the 2 years you missed?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the question he'd been asking himself since that first phone call. "I don't know," he admitted. "Some days I think I can. I understand why you did it, and I see that you were trying to protect me in your own misguided way. But other days I think about his first birthday, his first steps, his first words, all the moments you experienced alone that we should have shared. And it hurts in ways I don't have words for. So I don't know if I can fully forgive that loss. But I can choose to move forward. I can choose to build something new instead of staying trapped in what was stolen. That's what Julian deserves. That's what we both deserve." Camila nodded, fresh tears trailing down her exhausted face. "That's fair. That's more than fair. And Marcus, thank you. For coming when I called. For not turning your back on us even though you had every right to. For being the man I always knew you were. The one I was too scared to trust. Thank you for calling. For letting me be his father, even though it meant admitting you needed help. I know that wasn't easy for you." The next 3 weeks were critical. Julian's body accepted the transplant beautifully, his new immune system building itself cell by cell, day by day. He spent Thanksgiving in the hospital, and Marcus had a feast delivered from Boston's best restaurant, turning Julian's room into an impromptu celebration complete with decorations the nurses helped them hang. Julian didn't understand the significance of the holiday, but he loved the attention, the special food, the way both his parents were constantly present, constantly loving him through the hardest thing he'd ever faced. By early December, Julian was discharged with careful instructions and a rigorous follow-up schedule. Marcus had already arranged everything, renting a furnished apartment 3 blocks from Camila's place, close enough to be present but separate enough to give them space to figure out their new dynamic. He'd also quietly paid off Camila's student loans, her medical debts, and set up a trust fund for Julian that would ensure his future was secure regardless of what happened with his health. When Camila found out, she'd been furious. "I didn't call you for money," she'd said, anger flashing in her eyes. "I called you because Julian needed you. Not your bank account. I know. But I have resources, and my son deserves to have every advantage. His mother deserves not to work 3 jobs and still worry about making rent. This isn't charity, Camila. This is me taking care of my family because I can and because I want to. Don't let pride stop you from accepting help. It's not pride. She'd stopped, frustration and gratitude warring on her face. I don't want you to think I'm using you. That I only contacted you because I needed something from you. If I thought that, I wouldn't be here. I'm here because Julian is my son and you're his mother, and we're connected forever now whether we're together or not. Let me help. Let me be the father I should have been from the beginning. She'd accepted eventually, reluctantly, with the understanding that Marcus wasn't trying to buy his way into Julian's life, but simply ensuring that his child had everything he needed to thrive. Over the following months they built a routine. Marcus spent mornings with Julian, taking him to follow-up appointments and then to playgrounds and children's museums. Camila used that time to attend classes, finishing the social work degree she put on hold when pregnancy and single motherhood had derailed her plans. Afternoons and evenings they alternated, learning to communicate about Julian's needs, his development, his growing personality. They celebrated his second birthday together in January. A small party at Camila's apartment with dinosaur decorations, and a cake Julian demolished with enthusiastic 2-year-old joy. Marcus watched his son blow out candles and make wishes in the language of toddler babbling, and felt something settle in his chest. This was what mattered. Not the companies or the success or the public recognition. This, his son, healthy and happy and loved by both parents who were learning to work together despite their complicated history. He's perfect, Marcus said to Camila as they cleaned up after the party, while Julian napped off his sugar high. Absolutely perfect. He is. And he's so lucky to have you. She paused in her cleaning, looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I know I've said this before, but I need you to really hear it. I'm sorry, Marcus. Not just for leaving, but for not trusting you enough to stay. For letting my fear make decisions that hurt all of us. You deserved better than that. Julian deserved to have his father from the beginning. I hear you. And I've forgiven you, Camila. I meant that. He crossed to her, took the paper plates from her hands, set them aside. But I need you to forgive yourself too. I see the guilt you carry, the way you watch me with Julian like you're waiting for me to realize he was a burden and leave. That's never going to happen. He's not a burden. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I wouldn't trade being his father for anything. Even though you missed 2 years? Even though. I can't change the past, and dwelling on what I missed just steals joy from what I have now. I'm choosing to be present, to be grateful for every moment I get with him moving forward. You should choose that too. Camila leaned against the counter, exhaustion and emotion written across her face. I don't know how to do that. Let go of the guilt, I mean. Every time I see you with him, every milestone you witness, I think about the ones you missed because of my choices. How do I forgive myself for that? The same way I forgave you. By recognizing that you made the best decision you could with the information and emotional state you had at the time. By understanding that you were operating from trauma and fear, not malice. By choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck in past mistakes. He stepped closer, saw her eyes widen slightly. And by recognizing that Julian is happy and healthy and loved, and that's what matters most. You kept him safe, Camila. You kept him alive until I could help save him. You did everything right where it counted. She broke then, tears flowing freely. Marcus pulled her into his arms, let her cry against his chest while years of guilt and fear and exhaustion poured out. He held her through it, rubbed her back, whispered reassurances until the storm passed and she pulled back, wiping her eyes with embarrassed apology. Sorry. I didn't mean to fall apart. You're allowed to fall apart sometimes. You've been holding everything together alone for 2 years. You're allowed to lean on someone now. What happened next surprised both of them. Over the following months, their carefully maintained boundaries began to blur. Co-parenting playdates turned into family dinners. Separate bedtime routines became shared story times where they both read to Julian, their voices overlapping on familiar narratives. Marcus found himself staying later at Camila's apartment, neither of them quite ready to end the evenings. And Camila found herself looking forward to his arrivals in ways that had nothing to do with childcare and everything to do with the way her heart sped up when she heard his knock. They didn't talk about it. Didn't acknowledge the shift happening between them. Because talking about it meant confronting questions neither was ready to answer. Could they build something new from the ruins of what they'd lost? Could trust be rebuilt after it had been so thoroughly broken? Could they be more than co-parents when their history was so complicated, so painful? Julian, blissfully unaware of adult complications, brought them together with the unconscious wisdom of childhood. Deadass day, he'd demand at bedtimes, his small hand gripping Marcus's shirt. Mama and Deadass day. And Marcus would look at Camila across their son's toddler bed. And something would pass between them. Understanding, longing, possibility. In April, Marcus's company announced a major expansion. New offices in Boston that would make his presence in the city permanent, rather than temporary. He'd been commuting back to San Francisco for brief trips, managing his businesses remotely as much as possible to stay near Julian. But this expansion meant he could relocate entirely, build his life around being Julian's father instead of fitting fatherhood into the margins of his work. I'm moving here permanently, he told Camila over coffee while Julian played at their feet. I'm buying a place in Boston, probably in Cambridge near the office. I wanted you to know before it becomes public news. That's wonderful. Julian will be so happy to have you close all the time. She smiled, but something flickered in her eyes. Have you started looking at places yet? I've seen a few. Nothing feels right yet. He paused, weighing whether to say the next part. I've been thinking about buying a house instead of an apartment. Something with a yard for Julian to play in. Multiple bedrooms so he could have his own space when he stays with me. Maybe a home office for you if you wanted to use it. For studying or client meetings, once you start your social work practice. Camila's cup paused halfway to her lips. A home office for me? You're Julian's mother. You'll be at my place regularly for pickups and drop-offs, for co-parenting conversations. Makes sense to have a space you could use. Plus, Julian does better with transitions when his environments feel connected. If he has pieces of both of us in both locations, it's easier for him. That's very thoughtful. She set her cup down, studied him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. Marcus, what are we doing here? I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. We're not just co-parenting anymore. We haven't been for months. The way you look at me, the way I catch myself thinking about you when you're not here, the way we keep finding excuses to spend time together that have nothing to do with Julian. We're dancing around something, and I think we need to decide whether we're going to acknowledge it or keep pretending. Marcus's heart hammered. He'd been feeling it too, the pull between them that was becoming impossible to ignore. But acknowledging it meant risking everything they'd carefully rebuilt. If they tried and failed, it could destroy the co-parenting relationship they'd worked so hard to establish. I'm scared, he admitted. Scared that if we try again and it doesn't work, we'll lose what we have now. Julian needs us to be stable, consistent. I don't want to risk his security because we can't figure out our own relationship. I'm scared too. Terrified, actually. But Marcus, I think we're already risking his security by pretending. Children sense things. Julian is going to figure out that there's something between us that we're not addressing, and that confusion could be worse than us honestly trying to figure out if we can be together. She reached across the table, took his hand. I still love you. I think I never stopped even when I was running away. And I see the way you look at me, the way you find reasons to touch my hand or stand close to me. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't feel anything and I'll drop this. We'll go back to just being Julian's parents and nothing more. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. Saw the woman he'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. Older now and marked by struggles she shouldn't have faced alone, but still her. Still the person who understood him better than anyone, who'd believed in his dreams when no one else did. Who'd given him the greatest gift of his life even if the delivery had been wrapped in pain and loss. You're not wrong, he said quietly. I feel it too. I've been feeling it for months. But Camila, if we do this, if we try again, we have to do it right. No more running when things get hard. No more making decisions in fear without communicating. We have to be honest with each other. Even when it's uncomfortable. We have to build trust back brick by brick, and that's going to take time. I know. And I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to prove to you that I won't run again, that I've learned from my mistakes. I'm willing to go to therapy to work through my trauma so it doesn't control my decisions anymore. I'm willing to fight for us, if you're willing to give us another chance. Julian chose that moment to toddle over, crawling into Marcus's lap with the dinosaur in each hand. Dada pay? He demanded, shoving the plastic toys toward Marcus's face. Mama too. Pay dinosaurs. Marcus laughed, caught Camila's eye over their son's head, and saw his own hope reflected back at him. Yeah, buddy. Mama and Dada will play dinosaurs with you. They started slowly, carefully. Date nights while Julian stayed with Camila's mother, who was overjoyed that they were trying again. Long conversations about their past, their fears, their hopes for the future. Couples therapy sessions where they worked through trust issues and communication patterns, learning to be honest even when honesty was hard. It wasn't always easy. There were arguments, setbacks, moments when old wounds reopened, and they had to choose whether to heal them properly or let them fester. But they kept choosing each other, kept showing up, kept doing the hard work of rebuilding what had been broken. By Julian's 3rd birthday in September, they were living together in the house Marcus had bought in Cambridge. 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a playset, a home office where Camila was building her social work practice specializing in helping single mothers navigate resources and support systems. She'd turned her own struggle into purpose, using her experience to help women who were facing the same fears and isolation she'd overcome. Marcus's companies continued to thrive, but he'd restructured his involvement, delegating more so he could be present for Julian's childhood in ways he'd missed before. He coached Julian's toddler soccer team, attended every pediatric oncology follow-up appointment, read bedtime stories every night that he wasn't traveling for business. He'd learned that success meant nothing if you weren't present for the people you loved, that being a father was the most important role he'd ever have. On their wedding day the following June, Marcus stood at the altar watching Camila walk down the aisle in a simple ivory dress, Julian toddling ahead of her as ring bearer, his little suit making him look impossibly grown up at 3.5. When she reached him, Marcus took her hands, saw tears shining in her eyes. I promised to stay, she whispered as the officiant began the ceremony. I promise to trust you, to communicate even when I'm scared, to build our future together instead of running from it. I promise to choose us, Marcus whispered back. To prioritize our family, to be present, to remember that everything else is just noise compared to what we have right here. Julian tugged on Marcus's pants. Kiss now, he demanded, making the gathered guests laugh. The officiant smiled. Not quite yet, young man. But soon. They said their vows properly, exchanged rings that symbolized their commitment not just to each other, but to the family they'd built from ashes and second chances. When the officiant finally announced them married and Marcus kissed his bride, Julian cheered louder than anyone, absolutely delighted that his parents' affection was finally sanctioned by ceremony. At the reception, Camila's mother approached Marcus with tears in her eyes. Thank you for not giving up on her, she said quietly, for seeing past her mistakes to the scared girl who was trying to protect everyone, for being the man she needed you to be. She gave me Julian, Marcus replied simply. That gift alone earned 1,000 second chances. Everything else is just details. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Marcus found Camila on the terrace overlooking the garden where Julian was showing his cousins how to catch fireflies. She leaned against the railing, watching their son with the peaceful expression of someone who'd finally stopped running. Happy? Marcus asked, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. Incredibly. She turned in his embrace, looped her arms around his neck. Grateful. Blessed. Still a little amazed that we made it here after everything. We made it here because of everything. The struggles, the separation, the hard conversations and harder choices. All of it brought us to this moment. He kissed her forehead. I wouldn't change any of it, Camila. Not even the painful parts. Because they taught us what matters, who we are, what we're capable of surviving together. I love you, Marcus Chen. Today, tomorrow, always. No more running. No more fear. Just us building our life one day at a time. I love you too. Both of you. He gestured toward Julian, who'd abandoned Firefly hunting to dig in the garden dirt with his cousins. Our beautiful, brave, perfect boy who brought us back together when we were both too stubborn to find our way alone. He saved us just as much as we saved him. They stood together watching their son play. Two people who'd lost each other and found their way back through the most unlikely path. Two people who'd learned that love wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances, but about choosing each other even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Two people who'd built a family from broken pieces and discovered that sometimes the most beautiful things emerge from the most painful beginnings. Julian looked up, saw them watching, and waved enthusiastically. Mama! Dad! Come pay! And they did. They ran down to the garden, scooped up their son, and played in the dirt in their wedding clothes because that's what mattered. Being present. Being together. Being family. The rest was just details. Some stories don't end with happily ever after. Some stories end with we're figuring it out together, and that's enough. This was one of those stories. A story of second chances and hard-won forgiveness, of trust rebuilt brick by careful brick, of love that survived even when it probably shouldn't have. A story that proved that sometimes the calls we dread receiving are actually the ones that save us, that bring us home to where we were always meant to be. Marcus had answered that 2:47 a.m. phone call 2 years ago thinking it would bring devastation. Instead, it had brought Julian. It had brought Camila back into his life. It had brought him a family and a purpose that made everything else fade into background noise. And standing in the garden with dirt on his wedding suit and his son's laughter filling the air and his wife's hand in his, Marcus understood that some of the best things in life come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. You just have to be brave enough to answer when they call.